That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, we are now less than 10 days away from the start of fall camp. I can't believe it's almost here. First of all, we're going to be taking some mailbag questions from people. We just thought we'd let everybody else steer the conversations. Any questions that people have as far as fall camp in Alabama in 2025, we wanted to address at least some of those, as many as we can get to. But before we get started with that, kind of how you feeling about fall camp and things finally getting underway?
So excited, so stupidly excited. Before we got on here, I watched a few minutes of Big Sky Media Days on ESPN Plus. That shows how over the top nuts I am about football getting started, but especially with Alabama. Whenever there's a new quarterback, I mean, I hate to just pile on to the obvious topic, but whenever there's a brand new starting quarterback, that's where all the interest is going to lie. And I'm like everyone else. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Todd does with fall camp. It's so late in his career, Clint, that this is the one and only shot Ty is going to get now to be the starting quarterback at Alabama. If it doesn't work out for him this fall, it's very likely not to work out for him at Alabama. So I'm excited to see what he does with it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The question, no, we won't get into that. That would be too much. This would become a 30-minute quarterback talk before we got into anything else. So we'll skip that. That's a time for another day. But it is, going to be a conversation worth having because, all the talk all offseason has been if Alabama were to have a game today, Ty Simpson would be the starter. And nothing up to July 30th could have changed that unless an injury had happened. So now after July 30th, maybe something could end up changing. So then it's, those types of questions, like him getting that at SEC Media Days, especially multiple times, like Paul Feinbaum pushing him to try to answer it and be more definitive as far as Ty Simpson being the starter. I didn't think there was a point because nothing had changed. But, about halfway through fall camp, it will be a conversation or a question worth asking at that point. But that is a topic for another day. We'll go ahead and dive right into the questions. And the Smoothie King on Twitter said, player more likely to play themselves into the first round, James Smith or Isaiah Horton?
Wow.
Great question.
Oh, man, your listeners have man, that's good. I think most people are going to answer Isaiah Horton. I'm going to go James Smith, and this is why. Horton's a year ahead of him in the sense not a lot of people realize. I mean, Horton left Miami draft eligible. I mean, now that doesn't mean that we should be concerned that maybe he's not that good because he didn't turn pro and instead he transferred. We should. That's not the point. The point of my answer is James Smith hadn't been draft eligible until now. And I don't think there's been any real reason to expect James Smith to play like a pro until now. And I love his upside. He was the 5-star coming out of high school. That's often a rating given by the experts to future first-round picks. Again, I'm not down on Horton. As a matter of fact, I'm high on Horton. But Horton's going to have to split a lot of the stage at wide receiver with Ryan Williams, who's likely to get more targets, with Jeremy Bernard, who's 1 year older. He's a senior. Horton's a junior. I know Horton's got the redshirt year. But my answer is James Smith, but I don't fault anyone who goes the other way on this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you as far as James Smith. I think they both play positions that's valued in the NFL. So if either one of them had a really good season, it's not like their position's going to knock them down draft boards. But Isaiah Horton, you got to think about what that would mean. First of all, when have we seen a wide receiver 3 in an offense? I understand Ron Williams is not draft eligible, so it is possible maybe that there was a wide receiver 2 who was, drafted in the first round, and he wasn't even the wide receiver 1 for his college offense. That I'm sure has happened plenty of times. But at the same time, what you're assuming there is Isaiah Horton would, in my opinion, probably bare minimum need to be wide receiver 2 in order for that to happen, unless he was just a freak athletically and then just tested off the charts. But even still, you've had really good, very, very productive wide receivers fall to the second round. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf was an absolute freak physically. So like I could right now I kind of have him in that day 2 range. Now he could very well come back next season. Both of these guys could be back. And then we could be having this conversation again next off season, and maybe we will have a different answer because Jeremy Bernard moves on to the NFL. Isaiah Horton and Ryan Williams, they'll both be draft eligible by that point, and it's possible that you get two of the same, from the same offense going in the first round. But just right now, James Smith, he brings a first round skill set, in my opinion. He has not put it all together yet, and that's what I'm still waiting on. But he showed signs of putting it all together against Michigan in the bowl game, and that has me very, very excited about him. And he will be a starter, assuming health, right there alongside Tim Keenan. And he will be a heavily relied on guy. He will be one of the main guys at his position, as you mentioned. So I'm right there with you. I think James Smith would be the more likely of the two. Next question is from Troy Sims on Twitter. And he asked, what experiments do you think the coaches will explore in fall camp? For example, Dijon Lee or Zay Mincy at Husky. So, what are some things maybe that you could see Alabama's coaching staff trying out in fall campus as far as maybe some of the player personnel?
I love the question, and I love his own answer to his own question, because in the secondary, I think the only position where there is some vulnerability is Husky, because I just see in terms of the starter, in terms of the guy that's going to play the first snap, at corner, that's just sort of done to me. Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson are just sort of set in stone there, and Keon Sabb and Bray Hubbard sort of set. Now, other guys are going to play. Zay Mincy's going to play safety. Cam Calhoun and Dijon Lee are going to play some corner. But in terms of the starters, that's set. The starting Husky right now, as we speak today, before even fall camp starts, is Deshaun Jones. I think he's a little more vulnerable to losing that spot. So, yeah, I could see some experimentation there. But a couple things, I wouldn't get too carried away with it. Number one, I do think Deshaun played well. As a matter of fact, with very little notice, and I'm not suggesting these things have a direct correlation, but with very little notice, last year, about the time Deshaun became a regular at Husky, is about the time Alabama started being a much better defense. Now, that directly related, I don't know, but could be a factor. But it was about the Tennessee-Missouri time that Deshaun started playing Husky, moving from corner, and Devonta Smith was hurt all the time, and Deshaun started playing a lot of snaps at Husky, and Alabama started getting better. But secondly, I would just bring this up too: is that in the spring, which is a better time to experiment than fall camp when you're getting ready to play games? In the spring, to my knowledge, and we're not at practice all the time, and we don't hear of every little thing that happens, but to my knowledge, in the spring, it was just Deshaun Jones and Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. getting those snaps at Husky. I don't think Dijon Lee and Zay Mincy got snaps there. They may have. I'm just unaware if they have. So I think the spring is more time for that. So I'm not going to set my watch to that happening, but no doubt it is very possible, because I do think that Deshaun Jones' job isn't as secure as the other four guys.
Yeah, I think that both be capable of playing Husky, and I've talked about it. I talked about it back in the spring about, hey, towards the latter half of the spring, you might start seeing some of those experiments start to happen. I feel like if that was going to be in the plans, they probably would have gotten it started back then. Now, granted, they could start that experiment, and then whoever is there doesn't end up being the starter. It's just they're going ahead and getting them some snaps. They're trying to solidify the depth at that position. But I will say, you look at Deshaun Jones and the fact that he's a returning guy. He played quite a bit last year. He's played quite a bit throughout his career. You look at Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. and the development that he's had. You still have Red Morgan, who's now playing on the perimeter. But if you had to really start working into that Husky depth, you could probably move him back inside. So it's like I don't think it will necessarily be necessary, is the way that I'll put it. As far as other experiments, I'll be curious to see how they get a lot of this defensive front personnel on the field. Like, are there packages, not cheetah package-esque, but it's like where you can get multiple wolves, multiple bandits, maybe at the same time, where you've got a wolf and two bandits all, at the same time, maybe a couple of wolves. One of them's playing off-ball linebacker and others playing, lining up where the wolf is at. And then you're kind of offense don't know who you're bringing, like that type of experimental stuff, seeing if there's some sub package types of things that you can do to bolster the pass rush. I can maybe see that, being something that they kind of toyed with a little bit in fall camp.
I love that answer. It's very Saban-ish of me, spending 17 of the past 18 years watching how Saban does things and only 1 year of watching how Kane Womack does things. But I love what you're saying, and I would like to see more of that. I mean, I think Kane would probably use different nomenclature that I'm about to use, so this is going to sound like gibberish to him. But I would like to see more on 3rd and 10 and longer, that there's two wolves out there, because the pass rush just has to get better. And to me, that's not so much X's and O's, it's dudes. I want to see dude pass rushers on 3rd and 10. And conversely, when it's 2nd and 3, 3rd and 1, two bandits, at those spots, get bigger. And then now it's very Saban-ish to be substituting in that vein. I don't know that Kane Womack likes to do that. We've only seen 1 year of it. He did do some of it. We did see some of that. I'd like to see a lot of it, but admittedly, 17 of the past 18 years, I've watched Saban do it, and Saban sort of operated that way.
That's 100% correct. And that's kind of to keep this conversation going, because it actually kind of aligns with two of the questions that we've got coming up. So I'll go ahead and read both of those, and then we'll continue this pass rushing conversation. So Coleman Campbell on Twitter, he asked, my biggest question mark that I have circled isn't the quarterback play. It's not the defensive back play, but the defensive line. I'd like to know what steps have been taken to get a better pass rush than we saw last year. So that's one. And then Kyle on Twitter asked, with players like Quay Russaw and LT Overton and Keon Keeley, what are your expectations for who steps up to be the guy at pass rusher in fall camp and for the upcoming year? Do you see our pass rush as a strength this year, or as a multi-game work in progress? So, who do you see being kind of the guy as far as being a pass rusher? But then what steps do you think has Alabama taken to improve the pass rush compared to a season ago?
Gosh, I hope there's been some steps, because, that was a problem. The defense was good. I don't know that all of us have given enough credit to how good the defense was a year ago. My opinion, because I know you can deep dive analytics, but I just sort of still old school base it on points and yards. To me, those are still significant things. I know in baseball, nobody cares about batting average, but I still care about home runs and RBIs. To me, it's like, well, I still look at yards and points. And last year's defense gave up fewer yards and fewer points than any defense at Alabama since 2017. So I don't think we're giving the defense enough credit. I said that to say this: the pass rush sort of sucked. So the pass rush was sort of bad. It wasn't even average. It was bad. So if you could be as good as you were in defense and improve the pass rush, now you're cooking with gas. Again, I said it in the last answer. I'm more of a dudes than X's and O's guy when it comes to this issue. I do think Kane Womack can do things X's and O's wise. He's the kind of mind that can scheme things up. But the real answer to me is just dudes, Clint. And in terms of who can step up and be pass rushing guys, I hope that it's LT Overton at Bandit and Quay Russaw at Wolf, because those are the guys slated to play the most snaps. Assuming good health for everyone, and it never is, but assuming good health for everyone, LT is going to play the most snaps at Bandit. Quay Russaw is going to play the most snaps at Wolf. They need to be the best pass rushers. LT was a half step off last year of being one of America's preeminent pass rushers, but he was a half step off. So he just racked up pressures, which are helpful. He racked up hurries, which are helpful. We would like to see more sacks, or any sacks. Quay Russaw, same way. There just wasn't production in the sack number. I know Quay himself has said in interviews this spring and summer, I've been working on my pass rush. I hope so. Because if it's not coming from LT and Quay Russaw, then it's going to have to come from deeper guys on the bench. It's going to have to come from Keon Keeley, maybe at Bandit, maybe even true freshman Justin Hill at Wolf, because it's desperate times that call for desperate measures. I'm a little desperate to improve the pass rush. So I want it to be Overton and Russaw, but if you find out early that it's not, look at somebody else. We ain't got time to spend another year not putting quarterbacks on the ground.
Yeah, I agree that it's got to be better. What I will point out to people is think about all of the different circumstances. Now, when you talk to Alabama's coaching staff, they'll straight up tell you it needs to be better. It's been a point of emphasis. So it's not like I'm sitting here telling you, hey, it's not a problem. You got nothing to worry about. It has to be better. I fully acknowledge that, agree with it. But I want you to think about it. Number one, LT Overton didn't finish enough. Alabama finished number 64, tied for 64th in the country as far as sacks last season with 25. If he just would have finished more of his plays, he probably, instead of 2 sacks, would have been up there in the 8 range, maybe 9 range. You add another 6 or 7 sacks onto his total, that brings the team total now 31, 32, which would rank inside the top 40 nationally. Still not where it needs to be, especially relative to where it was when you had Will Anderson and Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner. But it would, when you start talking about, okay, top 5 in turnovers and you're ranking in the top 40 in sacks, that becomes a little bit more balanced and you can kind of live with it more. Still would need to see it improved. But then I want you to think about Quandarius Robinson, maybe the best pure pass rusher on Alabama's roster last year, goes down halfway through the year. Jahad Campbell is probably one of the better pure pass rushers on the team. What happens later in the season to prevent that sack total from being up? Deontay Lawson gets hurt. Now Jahad Campbell has to work to being just exclusively an off-ball linebacker and not play any wolf out there on the edge. You talk about, a lot of your guys who were kind of mainstays or more of your interior guys. They were around a lot. They were healthy, but they're not going to be overly productive as far as your pass rush. You look at Quay Russaw. The fact that he gets banged up in week 3 and in my opinion was never 100% healthy for the rest of the year, that's another one that plays into it. You look at Keanu Coote, leaves the team early. You look at guys like, there's just a lot of different players. Keon Keeley wasn't ready to be a consistent contributor. We like what he brings as far as the upside as a pass rusher. Jordan Renaud was playing a little bit out of control. So a lot of these guys, it's like you can individually look at each player and say, okay, there was kind of reasons. You still got to get more production. You've got to finish better, and you've got to have a more consistent mainstay, bare minimum 1, to be a guy who is going to play complement to LT Overton. Because if that's all you got, defenses are going to take him out of the equation. I mean, it's too simple to kind of roll things out away from him. If you got guys coming off of both edges, you're going to be a problem, especially when you've got those pocket collapsing types like a Tim Keenan or like a Jeremiah Beeman or James Smith causing some havoc on the interior. I think that Alabama, a huge point of emphasis for them this offseason has been finishing plays. And then also they've got to do a little bit more, when you go those 3-man fronts and you're, as long as you're compensating on those passing downs and you're bringing pressure to make sure that there's 4 getting after the quarterback pretty consistently, you hope that those guys win those individual matchups. And I think Alabama's got the talent to be able to do that. But you've also got to help them out a little bit. And so I would like to see a little bit more as far as the pass rush. There's no doubt about it. But I also think that there was I don't think it was as bad as it was perceived to be last year. I think a lot of the circumstances, there was a lot of circumstances playing into that. So,
a sack is better than an incompletion. But when your pass rush causes if your pass rush is causing the quarterback to throw the ball before the quarterback wants to or before the design of the play allows, that's a positive. That's a check in the positive. It's not a negative because you didn't sack the quarterback. I mean, and Saban used to say that, affecting the quarterbacks. What Saban, it's so true. And last year's team was pretty good at that. Like you just said, I'm not sure they get enough credit because there was a lot of affecting going on. But I think even Kane Womack would sit here and tell us, we need to sack quarterback more.
That's a great way to put it. And I mean, a perfect example, Malachi Moore's interception against Tennessee. That to me was Quay Russaw. He turned the corner and should have had a sack. He got held by the running back as he turned the corner on the tackle and got spun around. And so that should have been a sack. But what it did do was it led to pressure. Quarterback throws it, a terrible throw, awful throw. They shouldn't have thrown, but it was an easy interception for Malachi Moore, and it was the quarterback trying to get rid of the football. So that's the kind of thing I've said about this Kane Womack defense is more pressure to turnovers than pressure to sacks, but that doesn't mean that pressure to sacks can't happen or shouldn't happen.
Great point. That's a great point. They did create a lot of turnovers. That was a nation-leading type number in terms of creating turnovers. A lot of that came from quarterback pressure. So maybe this is slightly overblown, but no, let's put more quarterbacks on the ground.
That's right. And I think that, I want them to keep that edge because I think those extra possessions offensively, when you generate those turnovers, are critical, especially when you got an offense that, if you can pretty much trust the offense where it's like every time they take the field, they have the ability to score, no doubt about it. And they're doing it at a very high clip. Then when you get those extra turnovers, you might give up 21 points in a game, but when you're scoring 49, does it really matter? So that's kind of, you still want to see the turnovers, but the sacks and putting the opposing offense in unfavorable situations, and that's something that I don't think Alabama did enough last year either, which is, okay, if you can create a negative play on first down or second down, now it's like second and long, it's third and long, a pass is coming where you can anticipate that, and then that might lead to a stack. You get a sack on first down, and then you end up getting a sack on third down because it was an obvious passing situation, and you don't have to worry about the run. You can just pin your ears back and get after him. If they can do that more, I think that will lead to more sacks. So I think it's a combination of factors, but I believe they got the dudes. When you look at the NFL talent, I believe they got it. I think they got depth at Wolf. I think they got depth at Bandit. I like the interior guys. I think they got some situational players like an Edric Hill who can provide some juice as far as the interior pass rush. I think James Smith is going to take a massive step forward. Tim Keenan is that pocket collapsing type where, if you got guys who are crashing off the edge and winning those edge battles and the quarterback trying to step up and you've got Tim Keenan collapsing the pocket, he has nowhere to go. So, the good combination, if you can get stuff working right. Don't think they have a ton of just super twitched up guys on the interior, but I think they got enough where they can provide some complementary interior pass rush to what they're going to have on the exterior, which I think is going to be, pretty successful. But once again, we'll have to wait and see. And the fact that, Keon Keeley could end up playing a pretty important part in that, he could end up being the fourth Bandit. So I don't want to sit here and say he's going to be a massive part of it, but he was a guy who you could only play in very specific situations last year. And you saw it at the end of the Auburn game where it's like they're throwing the football. They're down multiple scores. It's, flat, last couple of drives, they've got to put touchdowns on the board. They're dropping back and throwing. You didn't have to worry about his inability to set a hard edge and be strong at the point of attack because they're throwing the football. So you could trust him to go out there and just, hey, do what you do, get out to the quarterback. Now that he's become a little bit more complete, he'll get more of those opportunities. And the more he's on the field, he's a dynamic pass rusher. So, he'll get just the fact that he's on the field a little bit more, 10, 12 snaps a game, maybe that should lead to, you being able to have, another pass rusher on the field. So definitely something to keep in mind. Anything on that before we move on?
No, I agree with you that James Smith has a big leap year coming. Let's call it that. I mean, a leap year where every year, most of these players get a little better every year. I mean, that's a typical developmental track, is getting a little better every year. And sometimes things fall in place where a kid makes a big leap. I foresee the big leap for James Smith and Caden Proctor, who I find similar-ish in that way, because I think finally everything is in place for Proctor and everything is in place for James Smith to have that leap year.
Yeah, offensive line is definitely something I want to come back to for sure. Next question is from T on Twitter, and he asked, do you think Daniel Hill could be running back 2 this season?
Well, yeah, I do think that he can. I think it's possible. This is sort of almost like my pet peeve or soapbox position group on the team this year, in the sense of like, well, Jimmy's always so positive about everything. Well, then let me talk about the running backs then, if you want to hear Jimmy go the other way. and what I mean by that is just, it's got to be better. It's got to be better than it was last year. On a per down, per snap basis, this group has to be more productive. And I know the excuses from last year, and I'm not saying that there isn't some merit to them where you were largely RPO based. The quarterback was keeping the ball a lot. The number one run threat on the team was the quarterback. And I'm not in any way disparaging that. I think that was the the coaches building the team around what largely worked. But the production from the running back position wasn't good enough. Now, again, I'm not saying it's because Jam Miller wasn't good enough or Justice Haynes wasn't good enough or Rich Young wasn't good enough. I'm not saying that specifically. I'm just saying it just wasn't good enough. And maybe the blame does lie elsewhere with the coaches of the scheme or the quarterback. Maybe so. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, can you be more productive this season out of the running back position? My answer is yes. My answer is yeah. I think that's what we'll see. But it's got to be better. And for that reason, Daniel Hill may be RB2, because what we saw last year wasn't good enough. There wasn't good enough production from the RB1 or RB2. Let's remember last year, Haynes and Miller were sort of co-RB1s, and then Rich Young was sort of the third guy. Daniel Hill feels almost certainly to be in that mix, whether it's 1A, 1B, or 2. And the spring was any indication, then yeah, he could be one of those guys. One of the things that has me excited about the group, instead of just complaining about them, is that I like everyone. I still like Jam. I like Rich Young, who I think was sort of banged up quite a bit and now is finally getting his best chance. I like what I saw from Daniel Hill this spring because I didn't really see it coming, but he was a good story this spring. Draylon Washington, the transfer from Louisiana, is a real experienced physical guy. A.K. Deere is a 5-star, and Kevin Riley's the best home run hitter of the group. So I'm excited about all 6 of them. And I'm really anxious to see what they do. But I would also say it's got to be better than last year, because if it's not, Clint, that group is putting too much heat on Ty Simpson. There can't be all the weight of the world on Ty's right arm. The running backs are going to have to be his best friend. And I do think we're going to see more of a traditional run game, a traditional downhill approach with Ty at quarterback. Still see some RPOs. I'm sure you'll still see some of that. But I'm excited about this group, while at the same time I'm doing some bitching and moaning about last year from the running back spot.
The coaching staff will kind of tell you based off of kind of personnel decisions or numbers at certain positions. For example, tight end. Alabama was not healthy at that spot throughout the spring. They had 5 players already on the roster, though. Like, that's a healthy number of tight ends. And yet they went out in the transfer portal because they witnessed how depleted that position can become, and they added 2 transfer tight ends during the spring window to give you 7. That is a lot. Yeah. So the reason I say that is to say, well, Alabama only lost Justice Haynes from its running back room a season ago. And yet they went out and they added both A.K. Deere, and they felt it was important to add Draylon Washington. I think that is because, and Kalen DeBoer has hinted at this, that they were actually a lot more banged up at the running back position last year than a lot of Alabama fans realize. They didn't have a bunch of guys necessarily missing time, but they had a lot of guys who were not 100% all throughout the season. And so they were looking at it and saying, not only do we need to keep everybody else that we've got, we need, and you already had A.K. Deere, we still need to go add another body, give us 6 potential options in case we have to work into this depth more where we can get capable play. And a guy like Draylon Washington, who is sharing the workload with 2 other guys at Louisiana, he's certainly willing to come in and share the workload at Alabama. And if he ends up being RB3 or RB4 or, whatever, I think he's kind of willing to accept that. But he's kind of a capable option if you have to work to him. So that is one thing that I will say. I also think that, if you look at the Western Kentucky game last year, if you look at the South Florida game, not many touches for the running backs, but they were really productive from a yardage standpoint because they had a lot of explosive runs. I personally think that the coaching staff would rather sacrifice those explosive long touchdown runs to be able to consistently churn out 4 to 5 yards, because when you're able to do that consistently, that's going to allow you to be in 2nd and 6. in 3rd and 2 instead of, okay, we just hit a home run on the previous drive, went 80 yards, but now we're sitting in a 3rd and 12 situation and they're pinning their ears back. And for the next 2 or 3 drives, your offense isn't in favorable situations enough to justify the explosive runs. That, I think, is a critical factor, is being on schedule more offensively. I think the offensive coordinator is going to help that. I think that the quarterback, the way that he plays and can distribute to his playmakers, I think that's going to help. But a guy like Daniel Hill, I think from everything that I heard in the spring, he was by far the most consistent as far as churning out the 4 to 5 yard runs. He's also got a little bit more juice. I'm not saying that there's zero explosiveness from this guy. He's also phenomenal in the passing game. Like, I don't think he's like super elusive, but as far as catching the football,
great hands.
Yeah, you get him in space and let him get a little bit of that, momentum going. I mean, he becomes a runaway train really quick. The defensive backs, cornerbacks and guys out there on the perimeter have to try to tackle at 242 pounds or 200. Yeah, I guess it's 244, 243 now. Like, he continues to add weight. But, so I think that I wouldn't be shocked at all if he was RB2. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ended up being RB1. And I've said that multiple times this offseason. I'm not going to predict that right now because I could see it being a 2018 Alabama where Daniel Hill is viewed as Alabama's most consistent, best running back, but through seniority and respect to Jam Miller, as long as there's not a ton being sacrificed by having him on the field, like there was with Damian Harris relative to Josh Jacobs, he's probably going to continue to get the starting nod and probably going to get the most touches. But, and I don't want to forget about Rich Young. I know he's going to be a part of this conversation. I don't want to forget about Draylon Washington. He was brought in for a reason. A.K. Deere is a very talented player. Kevin Riley's very talented. But Daniel Hill, I think as far as what they're wanting to get out of this offense or out of this run game, I think he gives Alabama the best chance to do that the most consistently.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I like how you referenced the tight ends earlier about really the 2 tight ends they brought in. They didn't bring in Brody Dalton, the big bruiser from Troy, and Jack Samarco, another big bruiser from West Virginia, because they want to spread it out, line them up wide. I mean, these are line of scrimmage, hitch in the mouth guys. And I've always said that if you want to know what kind of an offense a team is, you don't have to ask, hey, are you spread? Are you pro eye? Or what kind of offense do you run? Ask them what the tight end does. What does your tight end do? That describes the whole offense. Is your tight end a 220-pound guy that played wide receiver in high school? Or is your tight end a 250-pound guy that puts linebackers on their back? And if you know that answer, you kind of know what the offense wants to do. I think the message of bringing in Brody Dalton and Jack Samarco from the portal in the offseason was sort of sending a message that, hey, Ryan Grubb's going to be a little more physical here. And he did the last year we saw him at Washington. He had a big back that put up big numbers. And Daniel Hill, I mean, I don't know. It seems like Daniel Hill's a good fit with that. So I'm with you. He could be RB1. That could happen. But I want to say that even though I'm a little hard on Jam Miller from time to time, my actual prediction would be Jam Miller has the best year he's ever had at Alabama in this offense. And Jam works his way into day 2 of the draft and has this great senior year. That would be my prediction. And that's kind of what I expect to see. But Jam hadn't been that player yet. so maybe Daniel Hill, if he gets that opportunity, it could easily be him.
Think about Alabama's inside run game between the tackles run game last year. First of all, considering how effective they were as far as quarterback keepers and attacking the perimeter, more of the off tackle stuff, explain the lack of the inability to create consistent movement and get consistent yardage between the tackles last year. Because when you talk about the individual pieces, Tyler Booker, number 12 overall pick in the draft. You talk about Parker Brailsford, undersized, and that certainly plays a little bit of a part in this, but he is physical, he is scrappy, he is phenomenal at understanding leverage and out leveraging defensive linemen. So like he's one of the best centers in college football. And then you look at Jaden Roberts and you say, I mean, that's what this guy does. He moves guys off the football. I wouldn't say he's like necessarily the most agile offensive lineman, but I think that Jaden Roberts' health played a massive part, because I think that, combined with Parker Brailsford's being undersized, caused issues a little bit as far as the interior run, on top of the running backs. Justice Haynes and Jam Miller just didn't always see it. I think the vision tackle to tackle is not as effective as it can be with the guy. I think Daniel Hill's got really good vision. We'll have to wait and see. I've thought that before about previous running backs, and then you see them in those situations and they don't. But I think that Jaden Roberts being healthy this year, on top of the fact that I think you're probably going to have another big mauler. You're not going to have a Tyler Booker caliber player at left guard, but Cam Dewberry's a big guy. He likes to move guys in the run game. Parker Brailsford playing between two bigger offensive linemen, both who are healthy, and he'll get after you as well. I think the interior run game is going to be improved for a number of reasons, but I think Daniel Hill could also end up working into that equation as well as Richard Young.
Yeah. I just earlier today was subjecting myself to watching some of the Oklahoma game from last year. And I just watched it this morning, and there was a snap. There was just one snap out of the many in the game that didn't go great, but just one snap on offense. They were rushing only three guys at the snap. They looked like they were bringing more. They were trying to confuse us up front. They looked like they were bringing more. They only bought three. Alabama had three guys, the left tackle, the left guard, and the center, all block one guy. The right side, the right guard and the right tackle, they blocked one guy, leaving one of only three that they were rushing. The only thing between him and Jalen Milroe was Jam Miller, who had to – this defensive lineman was not touched by one of the 300-pounders. He's running free, and this guy's 280 pounds. Jam Miller got enough of him to where Milroe could skate by. Milroe actually made a few yards, and it ended up not being a disaster that it easily could have been, because Jam did kind of a heroic job there. Point being, I think we were confused at times on offense, and maybe a little easier to confuse than traditionally at Alabama. It had nothing to do with Coach Cap or with those five offensive linemen. Was the nature of a transitional year, the nature of a new offense, the nature of a new blocking scheme, that even into November, you could still confuse that group a little bit. That's probably typical of a transition year, because I didn't see too many instances of those players you named on the offensive line. I didn't see too many instances of those really good players getting whipped. Like, oh, we just couldn't physically get the job done. But there were too many instances of confusion, blocking the wrong guy. The South Carolina game, where multiple times in the first half we left, of all people, Kyle Kennard unblocked. Kyle Kennard. Like, I'm an idiot, but I come out of the huddle or line of scrimmage going, where is Kyle Kennard, and do we have one or two guys on him? But there were multiple times he was unblocked, and that can't be by choice or design by the staff. So I just think there was some confusion at times as opposed to getting beat. And I'm not blaming anybody other than, hey, this is what you have to expect in a transition type season.
I think that's an excellent point. And, a lot of times it's no one factor. It's a combination of things. And I certainly think that what you're saying played a part in that. So, the fact that the play caller improved, the continuity factor, the fact that guys are going to be more confident playing in this system, the fact that the quarterback play caller marriage, I think, is going to be a little bit smoother, better wide receiver play that's going to be able to, I think Alabama's offense, and I've said this multiple times, very 2022 Tennessee-esque, where they can just attack you in a lot of different ways. Now, I don't think they're going to spread you out like Tennessee's offense does, but what I mean is that I do think they will spread you out a little bit, but they're going to let you as a defense kind of play the numbers game. What are you willing to put in the box versus what are you not willing to put in the box? And then we're going to attack you based off of that. And that can be really effective when you have guys who can win. Hey, we've got a numbers advantage in the passing game right now. We've got to have guys that can go out there and win their matchups and make a play. Alabama's got that. I think the health of their offensive line, the continuity factor, the fact that you've got 3 starters back with another couple of guys who have starting experience at Alabama on top of another guy who has plenty of SEC experience in Cam Dewberry, like the offensive line, all these different factors I think are going to be playing into this and how Alabama wants to approach the 2025 season offensively. And what I see are those styles of offense. It's like going into it, it's like, what can we take away? And what do they still have when we do take it away? And I think Alabama's going to be able to attack you in so many different ways that it's going to be damn near impossible to actually stop them. I'm not saying they won't be stopped all year. Obviously, that Tennessee offense in 2022, they ran into Georgia, and that didn't work out so well for them. So I'm not saying that there can't be circumstances guys have off games, but I'm saying, I think Alabama gets really explosive, very consistent play offensively relative to last year. And I think that's going to make a world of difference because if the defense is what we think it's going to be, you do have to be able to get after the quarterback because a lot of these teams are probably going to be playing from behind, which means they're going to be throwing the football a lot. But what that will do is that you're going to find yourself in a lot more situations where it's like, we know they're throwing the football. Let's just get after them. Let's get the right cats out there. Let's put them in a position to be successful and let them get out after some quarterbacks. And I think that when they're able to hunt like that, you'll see improvement. So I think it kind of all goes hand in hand. Next question. If you had to point to one player who perhaps isn't currently running with the ones or is projected to split reps on offense or defense, but could break out and have an all SEC season, who comes to mind?
Boy, I was thinking of a couple of guys, and then he threw in the all SEC season,
right?
Because that's tough to not be a projected one today. But you're alert now. I'll say Bray Hubbard sort of fit that profile a year ago, not a one. And I don't know that Bray Hubbard made an all SEC team, but he was playing like an all conference player when he was on. So I will use Bray Hubbard as, here's the name that comes to mind for me using Bray Hubbard as sort of a blueprint. This player is not going to be all conference, but we've never really seen him as a first team player. And I think he will be in the first team rotation. And I think he's going to play great. And that's Rico Scott. Not going to catch enough balls to make even third team all SEC honorable mention because Ryan's going to catch a lot of balls, and the balls Ryan doesn't catch, Germ's going to get. And if there's any balls left over, Isaiah Horton's going to get those. So I don't know that Rico's going to have more than 30 catches or 20 catches on the year. But I think he's going to be great. And also I think he's going to block. I think he could be the new Kendrick Law on the perimeter in terms of getting guys blocked out there. And I think Rico's going to play a ton. And I don't think anybody right now should consider him a one. But I believe he will be in the first team rotation. I don't know that he'll play the first snap, but he's going to play a lot. And I think he's going to play great. I don't know that he's going to make any all conference teams, but I don't know that there is an answer. Though Clint often blows me away when it comes to this stuff. So you tell me, but that's tough to not be a one, but you're actually good enough to be all SEC. Who you got?
Yeah, Rico Scott is a phenomenal answer because I agree with you. And they said have an all SEC season. So I agree with you that Bray Hubbard's a perfect example. I would describe the second half of his 2024 as an all SEC caliber season, whether he got that label or not. So that, I'm completely in agreement there. Rico Scott to me, part of it, I've said I'm very confident that he's going to be Alabama's wide receiver 4, but I'm pretty certain, Ryan Williams is going to be the dude. Jeremy Bernard's not going to the bench.
Right.
Isaiah Horton's the one that I'm super high on him. I think everybody's really high on him. I think, I'm not going to give him JMO type of expectations, but I'm saying I do think he steps in and makes an immediate impact. But I will say there is no sure thing 100% what I mean that he is wide receiver 3 over Rico Scott. So I'm sitting there saying Rico will be wide receiver 4, and I still think that. But if Rico ended up being wide receiver 3 and Isaiah Horton was a huge, important rotational piece, that wouldn't floor me. So I just want to put that out there, and I don't want anybody to run with that and say, he thinks Isaiah Horton's not going to start. I definitely think Horton's starting. So I think those are your top 3. But just, Rico Scott has made an impression on a lot of people this offseason. So I just want to, point that out. I think Daniel Hill is one that could have that type of, if he ends up being RB1, and I think if he's playing for one of the best offenses in the SEC, and maybe he's they're getting in scoring position a lot, and maybe he's scoring a bunch of touchdowns, and he's making an impact in a lot of ways. I could maybe see him. Jeremiah Beeman is a possibility, and the reason that I say that is because his is more based off of his own talent. Now, I still think he's like the first interior guy off the bench. I'm not going to project him to start over Tim Williams or James Smith.
Right.
But from what we've heard, he's done extremely well, and he's like, some people are really, really excited about him to a point where it's like, no, I'm not going to say that because I don't want anybody to get it twisted. Everybody knows I'm a big Tim Keenan fan, but I just think once Tim Keenan leaves after this season, I don't think anybody is going to be upset about who's starting at the nose next year, in that building. Now, the depth, we'll talk about that later, but Beeman is one where it's like, if he can make some splashy plays, we'll have to do it on more of a limited number of snaps, but even, I don't know, that could end up being a guy. I'm not going to say like Jordan Renaud. I'm not going to say Dijon Lee as a rotational piece. I'm not going to say Zay Mincy, just because, and now granted, any of those guys, I feel like through injury, and now all of a sudden, Dijon Lee is now a starting corner. All SEC is certainly possible. Jordan Renaud, something happens to LC Overton, he becomes like the main bandit. All SEC is certainly possible. Zay Mincy, safety, same thing as Bray Hubbard last year.
Great point.
All SEC is possible. But I just, I think it's through opportunity that would have to happen.
Yeah, here's one other name. I'm not sure that this qualifies as an answer for that great question, but I would throw Nakai Hill-Green in there as, I don't know if we look at him right now like he's a one. To me, he is. I mean, I don't know how the staff or how Chuck Morrell is labeling them right now. I think it's pretty apparent to everyone that the three primary guys at Mike and Sting are going to be, Deontay Lawson, Justin Jefferson, and Nakai Hill-Green. And I think we talk about Nakai Hill-Green the least among the three because he's new to us, but I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to be really good. I think we expect Deontay to be great, and we expect Justin Jefferson to be good. And maybe there aren't expectations for Nakai Hill-Green because he's new to us, but I think he's going to be really good. All SEC is a stretch for me, but I do think he's going to be a good player, and that's a guy we're not really talking about.
That was one where I'm like, okay, I kind of view him as like a co-starter, but based off of the question, which they said, or if they're just splitting reps right now with someone else, like they qualified. So I mean, that was that's
a pretty good answer then too. I like the Beeman thing. Someone is going to be the number 3 interior defensive lineman, whether it's Beeman or Edric Hill or Kelby Collins or Steve Boomois, but I think it's me, Jeremiah Beeman, and I'm with you, Clint. I think the sky's the limit there. I'm expecting him to open some eyes this year and for him to be a real thing in 2026.
I'm about to say something, and the first thing that pops into my head is like the Ricky Bobby Talladega Nights meme, where it's like, don't you put that out there, evil out there, Ricky Bobby. And so I mean, I know people are going to call me out for saying this. I'm just bringing a fear of mine to the public, which is, Reuben Foster, after his knee injury in the NFL, he was never the same.
Yeah.
Dylan Moses, after his knee injury, he was not that dude his final season at Alabama that everybody, where he was trending, and it was through no fault of his own.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, because what happens is like the doctors would know, the coaching staff probably knows, hey, he's got this issue, he's probably never going to be quite right. We have no idea, and I've not heard anything to indicate that he won't. I'm saying that is a fear of mine, where I want to put a lot more height. When I'm doing my player rankings, my roster rankings, I did move him up in the summer batch versus the pre-spring, because I feel like he is trending towards being back by fall camp at some point. Probably, he said last week at SEC Media Days, is probably not going to be getting all the reps and stuff in the beginning, but I think expects to play from week 1, and so with that, you got to have that reflected. But the second I see him still doing some of the stuff that he has done the last couple of years, I'm going to be giddy because I'm going to know this dude still got it. But there's this fear of unknown where it's like we think he's going to be that guy. But remember, we were all saying Dylan Moses is back, and then just hit the things that he can do, freak athlete, the closing speed, everything. He's going to be that dude again. Alabama's got him back. And then he was a good player, but he wasn't ever that player. So I'm going to feel a lot better once I see it from Deontay Lawson. And there's been nothing up to this point, to indicate that he won't be that dude again, except for some past examples that I look at. And it just makes me
reasonable fear. Dante Hightower is another guy who coming the year after his knee injury wasn't the same. Now he found his game again down the road, but I think the year after his knee injury was not as effective as before. So I think your fear is every bit as rational as my fear of snakes.
And I don't know if there's ever a situation where you don't see a snake and you get giddy, but if I see him doing some Deontay Lawson things at any point, and look, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, just expectations going in early in the year, I don't expect to see it. But I'm hoping that as you just see him starting to find it a little bit throughout the beginning of next season, we're like, because it was a late season injury. I mean, that's the other thing. It was November.
It happened late. It happened late. And Deontay looked light in the spring. I know he didn't participate much, but he looked light, probably because he hadn't been able to work out like
the
normal.
roster update, he was listed at 228 after being 239 pounds last year. So that's a reflection. And sometimes I don't even know if he's 228. What I will say, if that's true, we've seen him play around that weight and be effective. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with that. But it's just, the whole, it was confirmed on paper. We're not just seeing things. He is a lighter player than he was last year.
Yeah. I mean, he just looked that way to me in the spring. I stood next to him a couple of times and I'm like, dude, I think there used to be more of you.
I wish I could say the same. I cannot. Last question, and we'll get through it as quickly as possible. Live for Ball on Twitter asked, can you list 3 true freshmen who you believe will have strong opportunity to contribute this season?
Off the top of my head, I will go DeJohn Lee, forcing his way onto the field because he's so good. Lazier Brooks, forcing himself onto the field because he's just so good. And for third, I'm going to go more of a flyer here, Justin Hill, just because I'm so desperate for that pass rush to get better. And I think he might prove to be a third down magician, even as a true freshman. But keep in mind, in the past, when we've had a true freshman standout, like a Caleb Downs or like a Caden Proctor, it's because there's been opportunity. There's been a wide open position that is going to be won by the most gifted dude who happened to be a true freshman. I don't see in any of the 22 positions, and it's a testament to how good this team can be. I don't see any of the 22 positions that are just wide open to where a true freshman is just going to stroll right in. But the other way true freshmen play is just by being so good, they become the show. Ryan Williams did it a year ago at wide receiver, where it wasn't like Alabama had this, hey, we have no candidates to be wide receiver 1, because you did have Jeremy Bernard coming in, and K-Law was back, and he's going to be Kentucky's wide receiver 1, and Kobe Prentice had played a lot. I'm just saying Ryan was so good, he just proved, hey, I'm the best player, so he became wide receiver 1. I do think DeJohn Lee, Lazier Brooks, and Justin Hill are all going to be just too good to keep off the field. The question is, what level of opportunity do they get? Because they do have more established guys ahead of them in the pecking order.
And the way that the question was phrased is have a strong opportunity to contribute, not start. So I think that all 3 of your answers, I think, would be my 3 answers. I think with Jackson Lloyd, don't see him being a dude because of Wilkin Formby and Caden Proctor yet. If they had to turn to him, I think by a midway point of the season, I could see it. There's a lot of these guys where injuries could help them, and you can't predict that.
He could be a starter. He could be a starter if there's an injury, which is you pray.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thinnest position on the team.
That agreed. Now and I didn't want to go special teams like the punter, Alex. Do you have his last name down yet?
Asparuhoff.
Asparuhoff. Okay.
Asparuhoff.
I'm not going to go with him just, and I feel like he is a guy who could very well end up contributing. We have no idea what it's going to look like, but I just didn't want to go special teams because it feels easy. But if it was not Justin Hill for me, because I'm extremely high on him, I love the versatility, can see him being a chess piece that they kind of move around a little bit. If I didn't go with him as number 3, because we're saying contribute once again, right, and we know that they will contribute on the back end, Ivan Taylor would probably be the one that I would say, if not Justin Hill. So I would view it one, the same top 2 as you. And then as far as like 3A, 3B, I'd go Justin Hill and Lazier Brooks. So we're definitely on the same page with that. And I think that this freshman class, the combination of factors that Alabama has, where you talk about the continuity with the coaching staff, but you improved your play caller, but there's also continuity or familiarity there. You talk about once again, the quarterback play caller marriage. You talk about the continuity with the offensive line, the improvement with the wide receivers, defensively, just everything that they have coming back on top of some of the pieces that they've added to solidify for some of the depth. All of these are playing factors in me believing that this is a national championship caliber team. But one of the other factors is you have had a freshman group come in and you've heard buzz about a lot of different guys, which really helps the back end of your depth chart, can fill in gaps where you need to. Hey, if you need a cornerback 3 or 4, not only do you got Dijon Lee, who kind of seems ready to contribute, but you got Cam Calhoun. You talk about, if you need some more juice as a pass rusher, Justin Hill is an option who seems like he's going to be ready. We're not talking about him, not being ready. If he doesn't play a lot, it's going to be because the guys ahead of him, like Ivan Taylor. I don't think it's not that I think he's ready to step on the field and contribute from day one. Maybe not as a starter, but I think relatively close, where he would go through some growing pains. But the football IQ, the skill set, he seems like a day one contributor, but he's got 3 really good safeties ahead of him. So, but that just means that these guys, you can work in your depth more and feel good about it. I wouldn't say feel good about it, but feel good enough about it. But then also, as far as like, you're pushing some other guys down. Now they're your practice squad guys. Now you've improved your practice squad. Like, depth is so key in all of this. And I just think Alabama's freshman class is certainly playing a factor as far as filling the gaps for why I think Alabama is going to be pressing for a national championship. Jimmy, almost an hour. I appreciate you so much, man, taking some time. This was as fun as always. Do you have anything else you want to add before we hop out of here?
No, I just appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, man, this is always fun. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody who's tuned in. And we will definitely have to do this again soon, brother.
Looking forward to it.
Escape to Pearl River Resort.